Sri Gurubhyo Namaha. Welcome to our 23rd online weekly cultural heritage of Kashmir series. Today's lecture is by Dr. Ramesh Raina. We will begin our program with a prayer song by Subhadra Sridhar. Subhadra has appeared in our program earlier and needs no intro. Subhadra?
गलन्ति शम्भो त्वच्चरितः सरितः किल्बिषरजो गलन्ति शम्भो त्वच्चरितः सरितः किल्बिषरजो दलन्ति धीकुल्या सरणिषु दलन्ति धीकुल्या सरणिषु पतन्ति विजयता गलन्ति शम्भो त्वच्चरितः सरितः किल्बिषरजो दलन्ति धीकुल्या सरणिषु पतन्ति विजयता दिशन्ति संसार भ्रमण परितापोपशमनम् दिशन्ति संसार भ्रमण परितापोपशमनम् दिशन्ति संसार भ्रमण परितापोपशमनम् वसन्ति मच्चेतो हृदभुवि शिवानन्दलहरी वसन्ति मच्चेतो हृदभुवि शिवानन्दलहरी गलन्ति शम्भो त्वच्चरितः सरितः किल्बिषरजो दलन्ति धीकुल्या सरणिषु पतन्ति विजयता दिशन्ति संसार भ्रमण परितापोपशमनम् वसन्ति मच्चेतो हृदभुवि शिवानन्दलहरी शिवानन्दलहरी शिवानन्दलहरी
Thank you, Subhadra. We look forward to see you more in our future programs.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our speaker today with us is Sri Dr. Ramesh Raina, President All India Kashmir Samaj. I had the pleasure of meeting him at Delhi recently, and I am thankful to him for driving a long distance to meet me after he heard that Kanchi Mutt is involved in the Kashmir series. We thank him once again for joining us today. Born and brought up in Srinagar, Kashmir, Dr. Ramesh Raina did his graduation in medicine from Government Medical College, Kashmir. He continues to be a practicing doctor in Delhi's National Capital Region of Faridabad, which is also his home of adoption. Dr. Raina's emergence as a lead figure in post-Exodus KP, that is Kashmiri Pandit community, struggle has not been incidental. He has dabbled in socio-cultural activism through his student days, especially in his alma mater, where he fought student union elections and was awarded prestigious medical college color for being the best dramatist. It was, however, the tragic exodus of 1990s, January 19th, few days ago marked 32nd year, which led him to actively participate in relief and rehabilitation activities of the beleaguered community from Kashmiri Samiti, Delhi, the nerve center of Kashmir Pandits community struggle. During his stint in KSD, he became part of important official delegations and presentations before the government of the day. He also introduced Kashmir Bhavan Calling, popularly known as KBC, which continues to be a permanent feature of the prestigious community mouthpiece, Kashmir Samaj. He also initiated a very popular community connect program called Samiti at Your Doors. After completing his tenure, the urge for activism did not let him sit idle. He took over reins of yet another KP organization, Kashmiri Pandits United Forum, KPUF, and became its guiding force till 2009. There he initiated many popular KP-centric programs like Meet Our Bright Stars, where our meritorious student community would get felicitated for keeping the tradition of academic excellence aloft. In 2009, he assumed yet another onerous task in taking over as General Secretary of AIKS organization, All India Kashmiri Samaj, and Secretary AIK Trust, and remained in that position till 2015. In view of his commitment and contribution towards a cause, he was invited in 2012 by Sri Venkaiah Naidu, the Vice President of India, and then Chairman Joint Parliamentary Committee on the Relief and Rehabilitation of Kashmiri Migrants, to make a presentation about the displacement issues. During his period, because of team effort, AIKS saw a new beginning and a new meaning for the community. From 2015, he seriously engaged himself with the community welfare activities by way of contributing his views in various newspapers, journals, and actively participating in media debates on Kashmir. As always, we thank Sri Kanchi Mutt for our ongoing initiative and offer our namaskarams to His Holiness Sri Shankara Vijayendra Saraswati Swamigal. With his blessings, we continue with our Kashmir cultural heritage awareness lectures. Kanchi Mutt has always been in the forefront, modestly working with the sole aim of national integration, spiritual enlightenment, and spreading the uniqueness as Kashmir is our cultural heritage. We now have the pleasure in inviting Dr. Ramesh Raina, President All India Kashmiri Samaj, to take over.
Namaskar. Thank you so much. I wish to extend my profound gratitude to His Holiness the Shankaracharya of Kanchi Mutt for giving me an opportunity to make a presentation about the Hindu dimension of Kashmir. I am equally humbled by the gracious remarks made by Mr. Shankar about me. I'm really humbled. I'm really humbled the manner in which he described my profile. Coming straight to the subject, Kashmir has always been Kashmir. And Kashmir has always remained in the news for various reasons, because the contemporary Kashmir, which has remained in the news, has been there for wrong reasons. But Kashmir has a legacy. Kashmir is as old as 5,000 years old history, which is both written and spoken. Therefore, I start. The original name of Kashmir happens to be Sati Desa. What I say, I think it will sound a little different, but that is a fact, and that is my understanding about Kashmir. Normally we say Kashmir is an extension of India, but my understanding is that India is an extension of Kashmir. While saying so, we need to go back. We need to go back at the basics. We need to go back at the inception of Kashmir in a manner it is present today. There has been a continuum. There has been an uninterrupted continuity. And that continuity starts from the origin of Kashmir culture. In Kashmir, the Naga worship is the main feature of the religion of people of Kashmir. Kashmir culture is one of accords and concords. As all of us have heard, When we talk about Kashmir, that Kashmir was a big lake called Sati Saras, and there lived a monastery called Jalod Bhav. After the killing of Jalod Bhawa, an agreement was reached between the king Neel, who happened to be the king of Nagas, because Kashmir was inhabited by Nagas, and Kashyap Rishi to retain Naga worship as the predominant feature of the religion. Initially, Nagas were reluctant to coexist with the descendant of Manu, Vedic Aryans, and Pishachas and other tribes. When Nagas encountered intrusion, they secured a guarantee for their way of life, extracting a place of honor for their deities in the large Brahmanic pantheon. Therefore, further down the line, Kashmir culture gets influenced. And how does it get influenced? Then we have to talk about the history in totality. History in totality of the Hindu dimension of Kashmir, which starts. History records pre-Islamic period of Kashmir as Sanskrit or Hindu history of Kashmir, and divides rest of Islamic period thereafter into three stages as post-Sultanate Muslim period, Shahani Mughlai Mughal period, and Shahani Durai Afghan period. Despite Kashmir becoming Islamic, the Hindu roots of Kashmir remain deeply embedded in its soil, cultivated richly by visionaries, thought leaders, saints, and sages who ensure that it remains in the race memory of the people and society. It implies that the basic elements continue to remain unchanged even till date. It is a fact that Islam conquered Kashmir politically but could not conquer it culturally, spiritually, and ideologically. Despite persistent efforts to erase the pre-Islamic past of Kashmir, the Hindu history continues to dominate the social edifice of the place. And internationally acclaimed historic testament Raj Tarangni by Kalhana stands tall to prevent the closure of Hindu dimension. In the first half of the first millennium, Kashmir became an important center of Hinduism. Hindu history of Kashmir commences with the statement that the beautiful valley forming the kingdom was originally a vast lake called Sati Saras, as I explained, and the assertion has not only been copied by Mohammedan writers, but it agrees with the local traditions of the place. The land of Kashmir is a sacred land to which the scholars of the world pay homage. Even to the present day, the sacred city of Banaras, the Hindu Rome of India, acknowledges the intellectual superiority of Kashmir. Al-Burani, 1017 to 1000 AD, says that Banaras and Kashmir are the high schools of Hindu science. Kashmir, therefore, is too deeply rooted in its Hindu religious tradition. It is an acclaimed fact that the kingdom of Kashmir had grown and developed more in terms of its religio-civilizational culture. Both Hinduism and Buddhism had attained great spiritual heights during Hindu period. The valley turned into the hub of scholars who wrote several Mahakavyas. The famous tales of Panchtantra were written in the 14th century. The Sanskrit language reached peak of its development. People became learned and highly qualified. Scholars and different schools of thought rightly described it as the golden era of Kashmir. The Sanskrit history of Kashmir came to be recognized as the Sanskrit civilization, which constitutes an important chapter in the religious history of Kashmir. The religious architecture of the place grew and evolved as a Hindu cultural continuum, which assumed an uninterrupted continuity over the years. It formed the broad base on which the subsequent socio-religious structure continued to be erected. The socio-religious life thus emerged within the framework of Hindu culture. This developed form of Hinduism that incorporated distinctive local features in all the spheres reflected the local religious culture which shaped the framework of Kashmir. Social domination constitutes the driving force of Hindu history, which laid the foundations of strong customs, rituals, and beliefs. A view from the later history holds it as anti-Islam, thus paving the way for battle for Islam. It became a major element in foisting Muslim identity of Kashmir, it is characterized by imposing a new religious stream hitherto alien to Kashmir, which started engulfing the valley in a big way. It dug deep enough to gradually impact the societal sensibilities. The initial impulses changed the leanings to exert disproportionate influence on the indigenous religious community of Kashmir. Hinduism, being the ancient religion in practice, there had evolved over the ages. With its widespread destruction, it was brought face to face with Islam. The protracted onslaught against Hinduism resulted in the civilizational assault with far-reaching consequences on the psyche and history of future. The history of Kashmir hereafter is the history of Muslim rule under which Islamic zeal attained fanatical proportions. Its first casualty was the demolition of Hindu state. Almost 500 years of Sultanate period saw an unfettered intensification of assault on Hinduism, barring few periods when Hinduism saw revival and Zainul Abidin stands tall in creating a legitimate religious space for Kashmiri Pandits. Sri Bhatt, an eminent Hindu Vedacharya, turned out to be a big factor in motivating and transforming Zainul Abidin to be a truly liberal and secular ruler who treated all the subjects as equals. Subsequently, the policy of religious humanism as the mainstay of his political philosophy yielded results and proved to be a golden period for the Hindus of Kashmir, hitherto under great stress. The policies adopted by Sultan proved to be a new and fresh chapter for the revival of Hindu civilization. While the professional role of Vedacharya Sri Bhatt in bringing dying Sultan back to life is well recognized and documented, but the folklore behind the incident is lesser known. It is said that Sri Bhatt came across a Hindu yogi during his routine early morning Sandhya prayers who inquired the reason about the absence of Hindus in the valley. On coming to know about the prevailing situation, he is believed to have suggested Vedacharya to seriously take up the responsibility of rehabilitating Kashmiri Pandits. Consequently, in this regard, he is believed to have offered his soul to dying monarch on the condition that his body be preserved for 3 months, and during the period, the process for the return of rehabilitation of Kashmiri Pandits be expedited. But saying is that the yogi's body was created soon thereafter. Thenceforward, it was the Hindu aesthetic's soul ruling in the body of Zainul Abidin. One thing merits attention here is that he was a totally transformed man post-sickness. Central to 500 years of various periods of Muslim rule is the complete demolition of Hindu state and symbols of Hinduism, but failure to kill Hindu-ness of the place. Though the entry of Islam completed the process of conversion but retained its original content. This is evident from the fact that Kashmiri Muslims world over are known as Asthan Parast because its shrines derive its name from Astapan, which means centers of pilgrimage. Another important thing to note is the mode of religious worship, which has adopted distinct features uncommon to Islamic practices elsewhere. Viewed against this backdrop, vegetarianism on the anniversaries of Muslim Rishis, popularly known as Urs, constitutes an important element of the religious life of its people. Not only that, Darud Khani and Naat Khani is a religious peculiarity at Urs venues, but uncommon in the religious assemblies of Muslims elsewhere. Holding a Fatiha ceremony in the memory of deceased, veneration of Sufi saints, tombs, and graves is yet another manifestation of its continuous with past religious traditions and heritage. Though the core beliefs of Hindu religion were constantly challenged, yet the neo-converts defied to retain their Hindu surnames. Muslim mosques, though constitute fundamental places of worship, but came to be known as Khanqah in Kashmir because these places were not used for offering prayers only, but served as basic Muslim institutions for imparting the Muslim Sufi education and practices. Survival of residual Hinduism despite constant onslaughts, therefore, does not allow the full closure of Hindu chapter of Kashmir. Uppa Palava Priya Desa. Uppapalava Priyadesa means a country which is delighted in insurrection. This is how Kalhana describes Kashmir. This phrase is illustrative of the uninterrupted social and civil stress foisted on the place as a consequence of deep religious split in the broader sense. The religious dimension, therefore, is central to the onward cycle and long journey of history as a new force. Its impact is so strongly associated with Islamic influence as it tells the story of religious culture of Islam thenceforwards. In the utter darkness which tries to envelop the history of Kashmir before Islam is bitter towards Hinduism. It became widespread and the fuel was provided by over enthusiastic religious zeal in an attempt to wipe out the land of idolaters. Because of overwhelming Hindu culture and local population, it therefore became difficult for Islam to conquer Kashmir emotionally and psychologically. However, known as an entity to enforce radical monotheism and escheval of images of worship, Islam exerted influence to shape the favorable religious situation according to its beliefs and traditions. Pressurizing the minds of the people, the community grew up around its identity and practices, but the victory of Islam in Kashmir failed to shake the moral foundations of Hinduism. The objective of this long narration is to highlight the fact that Hinduism has deep civilizational roots in Kashmir, and people are intensely aware of this legacy. Though the subsequent flow of history is dominated by the changing religious landscape of the place, it tells the story of its people, place, and changing dynamics, especially religious leaders who used religious politics to capture the religious psyche of the people. It brought with it sweeping changes to political, social, and cultural perspectives of the place. The aim was to impact pre-Islamic religious environment and communities by engineering obliteration of its past. In its ideological and political spectrum, the sense of Hindu identity constitutes an important pole of its structure and edifice. The idea of Kashmir, therefore, cannot be so easily delinked from its Hindu civilization as it lives in the socio-psychological memory of Kashmir. We come to next phase of the whole thing. Kashmir thereafter, because as I talked about, there have been various phases in the history of Kashmir. During all these phases, we have seen that Kashmir had turmoil. There were wars. It's a history of wars. It's a history of coups. So when we describe it that way, therefore, we come to a situation that there have been some sobering periods. There have emerged some sobering personalities who left a deep impact on not the politics alone, but the society and the social mores of Kashmir in a big way, in a very, very big way. For example, Kashmir was passing through political and social putrefaction in most of its history. Emergence of some great people have a sobering effect and give its culture a prominent place. Laleshwari, she gave Kashmir religious humanism. And it is said, as I explained it in my paper, that Zainul Abidin pursued the policies of religious humanism as a main pole of his politics of equality and to accommodate Kashmiri Pandits again in the valley, to get them back again to the valley. The philosophy and the policy of religious humanism was pursued with a great amount of zeal, with a great amount of sincerity. Then we see emergence of Nundaresh. Nundaresh follows the trail left behind by Laleshwari. Then, as I talked about Zainul Abidin is known as Badshah in Kashmir. Badshah means great king. And it is reported to have followed Laleshwari religious humanism, as I said, as fundamental of his administration. He provides a new environment to peace, tranquility, and atmosphere for a cultural climate. Then we talk of Shribat. Shribat has been the game changer. Shribat is the man who made Zainul Abidin to forced him rather to follow the policies of liberalism. Because when he was on deathbed, Shribat was the man who treated him. And after getting well, Zainul Abidin is reported to have told Shribat, "Tell me, what do you want?" It was expected that Shribat will ask for riches, for gold, for all those things to make his life comfortable, but he did not do so. He said that if at all you want to give me a favor, get Kashmiri Pandits back to the valley. And that was the wish granted by Zainul Abidin. And thereafter, he was a transformed man, and Shribat became an important influencing factor in getting Kashmiri Pandits back and in ensuring that they get an honorable rehabilitation thereafter. So before the advent of Islam, Kashmir was center for Buddhism and Shaivism. After the advent of Islam, Kashmir culture passes through different cultural influences. Now what is that influence? The first influence is fusion. As a consequence, there's a genuine communication of minds between indigenous tradition, that is Shiv Darshan, and new tradition of Islamic mysticism or Sufism, which Muslim preachers brought with them from Central Asian countries like Khorasan, Baghdad, and Bukhara, cradle of Iranian Sufism. The fusion between the two was gradually taking place. And then we come, in this regard, Nundaresh forms a very prominent figure here. In this regard, emergence of Nundaresh on the scene assumes significance. Because of social, religious, cultural, and intellectual turmoil, he made a sustainable impact on Kashmir society. Even one Afghan governor, namely Atta Muhammad Khan, in order to gain support of Kashmiri people, stuck coins in his names. He made coins in the names of Nundaresh just to ensure that he gets support from local Kashmiri Muslim population. Therefore, Rishi order wielded considerable influence on the religious and philosophical beliefs of the people, but were unable to resist Hindu philosophy and Hindu trend of thought. So, all these things, it drew members from both the communities. Now, we have certain important khanqahs in Kashmir, which have a great influence, great psychological, moral, ideological, societal influence on the entire society of Kashmir, be that Muslims or Kashmiri Pandits. One is Great Rishi of Batmol, Srinagar. Another is Rishmol of Anantnag. Another is Janak Rishi of Ashmukam. You will be surprised to know Janak Rishi was a Kashmiri Pandit who got converted to Islam and acquired the seat of highest order in Ashmukam. The Khanqah of Ashmukam is his creation. So that is why we call it Janak Rishi of Ashmukam and then Baba Rishi of Baramulla. All these places are called asthans. We must understand. Why are they called asthans? Because they derive their name from Asthapan, as I talked earlier in my paper. Therefore, we have to understand all these things in terms of, now what happens? Though political conquest of Kashmir was complete, but cultural conquest did not take place in the real terms. Because Sanskrit civilization, which has an uninterrupted historic continuity, forms the core of Kashmir culture. Like, what's that? Now, that is Hindu belief system. Another is ritual structure of Kashmir. Another is forms of worship. And another is worship of deities. This is seen even in contemporary times because of the influence of the Sanskrit civilization, which makes Kashmiri Muslims different from the Muslims of subcontinent. Now, how does it make Kashmiri Muslims different from the subcontinent? Is vegetarianism is practiced on the anniversaries of Muslim rishis. Urs means anniversary of these rishis. So whenever there is urs of these rishis, as I mentioned, there is total vegetarianism practiced on their anniversaries. Then Kashmiri Muslim often recites Aurad-e-Fatiha with folded hands, a practice which was uncommon in the religious assemblies of Kubrawi Sufis. Then during the early hours of morning, one often observes some Muslims turning their faces with folded hands towards the shrines situated on the Vetasta. The holding of Fatiha ceremony on Fridays in memory of the deceased is a peculiarity of Kashmiri Islam. And Darud Khani, during these urses, which last for 5 to 7 days, is a refined form of puja. And this Darud Khani is not seen elsewhere in Muslims of the world. And even contemporary times, we have to, when I talk about contemporary means recent. Let me put it this way. Sheikh Muhammad Abdullah performing Dastar Bandi of Pandit Nilkant Hakku, in charge engineer of rebuilding Hazrat Bal Shrine. And Dastar Bandi is only peculiar to Kashmir. I don't say to Kashmiri Muslims, but Kashmir doing Dastar Bandi to Pandit Nilkant Hakku is a continuation of what we are talking about. Then there was one famous saint, his name was Kashkak of Nunar, who was approached by local Muslims and Hindus all the time to seek blessings for the successful completion of the Gandarbal Canal. It's very important to assume, because of agricultural reasons, government was initiating a Gandarbal Canal to ensure the water to the agriculture fields. And there lived one saint whose name was Kashkak. Therefore, they thought, both Muslims and Hindus, if Kashkak will not give his blessings, this canal will not be completed. Therefore, both Hindus and Kashmiri Muslims went to Kashkak to give their blessing, to give his blessings for the completion of this canal. So the sum total of my argument is that no doubt there has been an attempt to erase the Hindu past of Kashmir, and even during contemporary times, the exodus forced on Kashmiri Pandits ensured that Kashmir is made Kashmiri Pandits free. But despite all that, they have not been in a position to kill Hindu-ness of Kashmir, because it lives in the socio-psychological memory of Kashmir. With these few words, I thank you very much for watching me. God bless you all. Thank you so much. My pleasure. Thank you. Namaskar.
Thank you for the excellent summary you made, which actually summed up everything what you have done in our 22 lectures so far. You touched upon many things. What is interesting is your next phase that you described. Maybe you can enlighten. You mentioned about Shri Bhatt and Zainaluddin. Maybe those saints and Shri Bhatt type of people are re-emerging now, and so that people can return back. And you talked in such a way that it is going to come back soon, and you really summed up the connection which cannot be erased. You think it's happening?
Well, see, I'll tell you one thing. History is a sleeping giant. History records everything, and history cannot be unkind. This cycle of going back or coming will continue there, because Kashmir retains the living symbols of Hinduism there. Those symbols are, I quote, for example, there is Shankaracharya. When a visitor like you, like anybody else, reaches Kashmir, the tourist guide will tell him, sir, we will take you to Shankaracharya, we will take you to Hari Parbat, we will take you to Kheer Bhavani, and we will take you to other, for example, Drishta Devi, so on and so forth. So this is not merely visiting them. It is a statement. It's a statement. And this statement is there irrespective of the fact, because what we have seen in recent times is that there has not been only the physical terrorism. The terrorism has not manifested only in the physical part. it has also been done at the cultural level and at the ideological level. For example, I will quote, there was one saint poetess, her name was Arnimal, and just to ensure that she doesn't exist, there was a debate, a continuous debate, that Arnimal is only a poetic imagination and it never existed in the physical form. While as hard fact of the story is that she would come from Palhalan, and Palhalan still has the traces of Arnimal there. They still remember Arnimal. What is so peculiar about Arnimal? So peculiar about Arnimal is that she has richly contributed to the folk of Kashmir. Today also, whenever we visit Kashmir, and you will find folk songs written by Arnimal, and they are being sung still even till date. Therefore, we had to contest even at that level that Arnimal does exist, and we buried that argument. This is one thing. And another, Shankaracharya, an attempt again made by some fanatics that it is not Shankaracharya, but it is Kohimaran. Kohimaran was the Muslim name given to Shankaracharya, but Shankaracharya stood tall. Shankaracharya stood tall. Even Hari Parvat was given a different name altogether. I've forgotten what anyway, once it comes to my mind, I'll let you know. But again, there was an attempt to say, the whole thing is that there has been an attempt to erase the Hindu past of Kashmir, which is not going to happen. Let me tell you, as long as we have the living symbols of Hindu civilization there, the Hindu chapter of Kashmir cannot be closed.
Very interesting. Now, we have done 22 programs so far, which highlight the glory of Kashmir's Hindu past and heritage that you very nicely narrated. As one speaker also put it earlier, the community is tolerant, peace-loving, and coexisted several centuries. Why can't progress be made quickly based on this, which still continues? That's what you touched upon, and you narrated several stories, that coexistence and tolerance. Is it resounding now?
See, we are absolutely correct. We will have to respond this question from emerging trends of Islam. As I said, the Kashmiri Muslims world over were known as Asthan Parast Muslims because they would have those kind of things like Great Rishi of Batmol, Rishimol of Anantnag, Baba Rishi of Baramulla, Janak Rishi of Ashmukam. They are asthans, and Kashmiri Muslims worship these asthans, and that is why they were world over known as Asthan Parast Muslims. But what happened? It was a Sufi Islam which was tolerant. Not only Sufi Islam, I call it Hanfi Islam, because Hanfi Islam in practice in Kashmir was a tolerant Islam. It would accommodate minorities, and that's why you were living there on equal footing. And that is how tolerance gave rise. It is not tolerance on account of Kashmiri Pandits only. It is Kashmiri Pandits contributed in blunting the hard edges of Islam, in blunting its core of hardness and made it soft. Therefore, as I talked about fusion, this is what fusion means. Now, coming back to a situation when you are saying that if tolerance is there, can't Kashmiri Pandits return back? Now, this is where an important question emerges, and that important question is that the conservative Islam, Ahl Hadith, is entering Kashmir in a very, very big way. You see, Ahl Hadith is running almost 2,000 mosques. It is running almost 125 schools. So you have about 10 to 15 lakh followers of Ahl Hadith faith. Let me quote a small example. In some village, I had remembered the name, I forgot the name. there was a mosque to which everybody would offer the prayers. But what happened? The local population resisted. They told these Ahl Hadith people that you cannot offer the namaz here in this mosque because it belongs to us. There was a conflict. A lot of injuries took place. Both the parties fought. But ultimately, what happened? Ahl Hadith people built a separate mosque. So, what you are saying, you have to see it in terms of this thing. When conservative desert Islam is entering Kashmir in a big way, how does it enter Kashmir in a big way? As I told you that you have 10 to 15 lakh Kashmiri Muslim followers belonging to Ahl Hadith faith. And it is this very thing all of us need to contest. We have liberal Muslim constituency there. And that liberal Muslim constituency is shrinking very slowly. For example, I will tell you what happened. The burning of that famous I think that was on where it's a famous this thing where that was a shrine venerated both by Muslims and Hindus, and I have forgotten the name of that. It's not coming to my mind at the moment. If it comes, I'll let you know. Then nobody raised a voice. Had it happened, say, during pre-90, many people would have died because people were linked by way of their faith, by way of their belief. But once it was raised, because that was a wooden structure, though it got erected again. But the hard fact of the story is that the response it should have generated from the local populace, it did not. So that means there is a shrinking space of Hanafi Islam there. There's a shrinking space of Sufi Islam there. Because these are these faiths are the liberal faces of Islam, which will allow you to enter, which will allow coexistence to prosper, which will allow pluralism of Kashmir to prosper. And it is here, this very faith, which comes as an obstruction. Therefore, when we have to see this question in the larger context of Kashmir, then we have to see how to contest the hard faith which is entering in a big way.
You know all this too well, and you understand the realities better. Now, coming to the NRI's role, I thought it's very important to mention that Kashmir is most conducive for NRIs living in the West, as you have 4 seasons. As most of the NRIs returning to India, their main complaint will be the climatic situation, whereas Kashmir, you enjoy right from snow. And NRIs play a major role, as we have been seeing elsewhere. Do you envisage their return? I know that infrastructure is not there for them, along with others already displaced in India. So there is a great opportunity.
You're absolutely correct. You have to understand. We have to understand this question from a different perspective. The economy of Kashmir is totally dependent on government jobs. It is rather a peculiar situation where Kashmir doesn't have resources. It has resources, but because of certain things like Article 370, so on and so forth, people were not in a position to explore the possibilities. For example, tourism was there. The potential of tourism in Kashmir was fantastic, but it could not be tapered from the point of view it ought to have been. It would have added a great force to the economy of Kashmir. But unfortunately, the economy became totally government dependent, like it became government jobs. Government jobs were much sought after. Now, once there is Article 370 is gone, Kashmir has been integrated within the Indian Constitution. It comes under the broad umbrella of Indian Constitution. The economy is opening up. Once the economy is opening up, and if people start investing in Kashmir, and the local population gets involved in the development activities, obviously there will be a scope for NRIs to return. Obviously there will be a scope for NRIs to invest in the development of that place. And it will not be alone development of that place, it will be adding to the economy of that place, because economy is the main force of running any place or running any place. So that is why I said that once this argument, if we are in a position to open development in a big way, if we are in a position to create a space for development in the valley for Kashmir, you will obviously see not only NRIs, but a great activity, great communication. See, I'll tell you one thing, there are major industries here, major powers, Reliance, Adani, Tatas, Birlas. Why can't we think of those Tatas, Birlas, Adanis, Reliance people investing in Kashmir? If they invest in Kashmir, then obviously we will see greater momentum, greater movement. So it has to be seen from that context.
I know there are a lot of discussions going on on this, but the reason I talked about NRIs is a large population outside India, especially in the United States. You have organizations, so I'm sure they are equally watching this, and your comments will be helpful. And I also wanted to talk to you. I'm reading this newsletter, NOD, very informative, and a lot of nice articles by eminent personalities. I wanted to ask you from that most recent one. I quote, it's all from your editorial desk, what you've written. 32 years is marked by a feeling that we could have responded in a much better way. In your concluding remarks, you sum it up so well. I quote, in regular discourse and popular usage, we should harp on echoing the tune of the plural heritage in order to prevent the fast changing demographic identity. And when you mentioned that you should have responded in a much better way, maybe lack of media at the time in the 90s, and now it's like floodgates. When you open Twitter, you see so much information that we are not aware of. I'm going to just mention about what I read in Twitter as a concluding remark too. I think your mentioning about this is very relevant, and maybe you lost all those 20 years, and suddenly it's like catching up now.
See,
do you think so?
What I have written in this, I stand by it 200%. Why do I say all these things? We have to see this question because demographic changes, internal demographic changes. One is external. You force a demographic change from external. Another is internal demographic change. This internal demographic change has left no minority space in the Valley of Kashmir. When I talk in terms of rehabilitation, when I talk in terms of return, when I talk in terms of getting back to the Valley of Kashmir, there has to be a minority space in the Valley of Kashmir. And unfortunately, there is no legitimate minority space in the Valley of Kashmir. So the concluding part is central to my argument that we need to create a legitimate minority space for Kashmiri Pandits for getting. And what does minority space means? Minority space means physical mobility. Minority space means that you have to influence the trends, you have to influence the practices. As I talked in my paper, you have to be part of mainstream social life of Kashmir. Right now, you will be treated as aliens because the social life of Kashmir has gone in for a toss. It is affected in a very, very big way. So for me, the concluding remarks only point towards the creation of a legitimate minority space in the Valley of Kashmir.
Yeah, those are very important points that everyone should start thinking on those lines. Now, as a concluding remark, I thought I'll share with you a letter written by one of the community members, which obviously you mentioned to me only recently that it appeared in your NAD magazine, but I read that in Twitter. Just give me a few minutes. I'll share this.
Okay, please do. Yes, it is written by Sushma ji. It is written in January 2020.
Is that letter that clear to read?
No, it is not very clear. I can read it from my mobile. I think you have sent me that.
Shankar ji, you have to.
Raja?
You're sharing the whole screen. Sorry.
1 second, 1 second. Now it's clear?
Yes.
I think it's clear. Yes.
Make it screen full. Yeah.
You want to say this letter really sums it all, especially about what happened in 19th January. It's available in Twitter. You can go and then see. Written by Dr. Sushma Shalla Kaul.
Yes.
Very nice letter, very well written, and it just takes you to that 19th January 1990, what happened in an household. So what would you like to say, Dr. Kaul?
I'll tell you, Mr. Shankar, one very important thing. As far as my memory helps me, Sushma ji probably lost her father at the hands of the terrorists. And what she has written, we are totally with it. Because you see, intervening night of 19th and 20th January was such an event which nobody can forget. In fact, I call it a black spot on the history of Kashmir. And everybody has a version. Everybody has his own story. Let me tell you my own story. When I left Kashmir, my wife was pregnant. I left Kashmir in the wee hours of the morning at 4 o'clock. And while listening, Kafiro, Bago, there were so many scary noises coming from mosques, so on and so forth. I was running in my small car because what happened, I had purchased car only a few months before. I asked my wife that we will leave our car here earlier, but we will go. But she said, no, please let us take our car with it and let us travel in the car. I was so scared to drive. But once I was out of Kazigund, I felt a sign of relief. Till then, I thought maybe we'll be killed or something. So this element of scare, it has formed a part of our mental makeup. It has formed a part of our mental thinking. You see, there are two very important things which we have to understand. Kashmiri Pandits race, a total community, is a persecuted community. So we have developed traits of persecution. It's a persecuted community. So we are carrying a persecuted personality. We have developed a personality of persecution with us, and it is this very persecution which lives in our race memory. And on the basis of Sushma ji's this article, this is perfectly apt, and we totally agree with what she says.
Right. Yeah, I thought it's appropriate to mention, as I've been reading quite a lot about January 19th and articles appearing, and it's a good summation of the events in case people are not aware of what we are talking about. If you go and search in Twitter about January 19, there are plenty of hashtags, like you mentioned about the experience of several individuals. It's really heartbreaking. And I hope we are doing our small part in bringing this awareness on the cultural heritage, not only cultural heritage, and also the current scenario. And people like you could appear in our program and talk about roadmap and how we could see the light at the end of the tunnel soon, maybe in the years to come.
In fact, I would request you to join our virtual conclave tomorrow. I think I have extra, because I will be releasing a concept paper about the Kashmiri Pandits tomorrow, and I hope it's received well by our community, and we are working on it. By the way, are you recording it?
This is recorded. All our programs are recorded. All 22 and today is 23rd. It's all recorded. You can
My
always
pleasure.
go back.
You could send me a recorded link of this thing so that
Sure.
we can distribute it in our within our affiliates. Whosoever, if at all, some people have not watched it, and they can
Sure,
just
sure. It's all available, and I want you to make a note that this is not your only appearance, and we would like you to come back and talk about new things. And we are slowly moving to the third phase. You already talked about the initial summary, next phase, and maybe this is the latest phase what we are trying to do. And in our own way, we are doing our best. And Kanchi Math is very much involved in giving a lot of importance to this. And we want to continue this and like you to introduce more speakers also on those.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you. God bless you. God bless you. God bless you.
And thank you once again for sparing your time, and look forward to seeing you again in future programs. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, viewers, and we will again meet next Saturday as we plan to continue our program. As you would have seen now, we are taking it to the next phase. We have covered enough of past history, culture, and heritage, and we are going to bring more eminent personalities to address the current scenario and what needs to be done. Once again, we thank Kanchi Math and Kamakodiya TV, also Facebook pages and Twitter, YouTube for live streaming this. As mentioned earlier, today is our 23rd program. All 20 programs been recorded and available in our MDS YouTube channel. All you have to do is just Google or use the hashtag Kashmir Cultural Heritage Awareness. Thank you once again, and we look forward to seeing you again next Saturday, same time.